steel bed borders to live from headquarters. We went from bread on us, police and feds on us. We said to head forward, no wreck, no bread corners. We fed the best corners, low heat, no stress on us. That's God's grace. Yeah, that's God's grace. That's God's grace.
What up, world? Big Prophet Jewel Podcast, episode number 3, with my big homie Vincent Hedges, aka Lefspek. Very talented artist, very talented producer, podcast host, man of many talents, and intellectual. And we have great conversations. He makes great music, and I'm just honored to have you as a guest on podcast. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. Thanks, Darnell. I appreciate that, man. That was a nice intro. Yeah, man, I'm doing pretty good. It's February, but, keeping busy, pushing through, even with no work, making work, That's kind of, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so one of the things that you do that inspired me the most, also, I want to thank you for inviting me as a guest on your show, on your podcast. And we had an incredible conversation.
We did, yeah.
I love what you do. And could you enlighten the folks, enlighten the crowd about a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, I guess it was a few years back I started it. It was called The Emotional Revolution of Modern Man. First couple episodes was me reading from some books that had really sort of spoke to me and made me start reframing just how I saw life as a man. And I don't know, it was so inspiring to me. I wanted to kind of start a conversation with more men that are dealing with emotional vocabulary, that are dealing with, being able to manage anger and manage depression. And so, I just started talking. It felt like to myself, but then after a while, people started to respond, and it was, it was therapeutic even to do it. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
That's good. So, like, one of the things that we spoke about was coping, right? And how do you cope in modern day, like as a modern man? How do you cope?
Well, I'd say there's like healthy coping and unhealthy coping, and I definitely do both from time to time. Um, I think it's like for me, like music obviously I mean, obvious to you, I would say, but anyone who knows me would know that music is a big part of managing stress, getting things down on paper, or even just spending time making music as a musician, because it is like meditation. Music is, your mind is doing the exact same thing as it when you get right into music, you get in the zone. That's the same thing that like a Buddhist monk gets when they're like meditating for hours. So yeah, there's that. And then, of course, physical work or physical exercise. I'm lucky enough to have a job that work on houses and build things. So I have a physical job, and that really helps me. I also have a job that I work by myself. So, because I run my own show and I don't have a crew anymore. So I get a lot out by just being alone, having some solitude, and just working, so that's how I cope, I think. However, I do struggle with smoking weed too much. Sometimes in the summer I'm like drinking beer more than I would like to. So there are definitely things in my life that like keep coming around, that I keep trying to keep in check. So and I would say those are the unhealthy ways of coping, the ways to just disassociate from my stresses and things like that. So I definitely, I would say those are also on the spectrum of coping. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're all guilty of doing things like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, we're
right,
only human, I suppose. Yeah.
yeah. Like it's always about a balance.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Like once it gets out of balance, that's when it becomes a problem, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think everyone has their own walk and their own path. Yeah, and I think constant, keep checking in with yourself is really the name of the game for me, and my loved ones, right? See how my relationships are doing, see how my wife's doing with the way I am, see how my kids are doing, and see how I'm managing my ambitions, my aspirations. I mean, are they still in focus? That kind of stuff. And
I recently quit smoking weed a few months ago.
yeah,
'Cause
yes.
it wasn't my choice though. It was actually because a doctor. Like I went to get new glasses, and then my eye doctor said, "Hey, do you smoke?" And I was like, "I smoke
Hmm.
weed." And then he's like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
you should quit, or else it's
yeah.
gonna affect your vision." So
Yeah, there's a lot of ways it affects. I mean, I'm also on a break. I did 30 days in November to December on a dopamine detox, and then 2 weeks I blazed, and then I was just it's been about another 3 weeks. I think I'm letting go of that habit
yeah,
because of a lot of things. There's nervous system stuff. There's mental clarity. I mean,
exactly.
I'm getting older. I want longevity. I want cognitive, ability long into my late days. I don't want to be struggling with that. And that's a lot of it, it's the long game, and it's also, getting the most out of my days. I mean, I get tired more than I used to, and that
Yeah.
just makes me more tired, so but
Yeah.
the next day. So I'm weighing my options. But how are you feeling since you quit?
Um, I don't know. Like I was hoping to get more clarity
Yeah.
than I do. I think it's just
Hmm.
I'm really busy. I'm not sleeping enough, so I think that
Yes. Yeah.
plays a role. And I think also the lack of sunlight and just the winter
Yeah.
season plays a factor in
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
um, I did try one of those drinks, like one of those THC drinks, and I
Hmm.
just didn't like it. I didn't like I felt like I was forgetting stuff, like for
Hmm.
short
Yeah.
term memory. So I just like I
Yeah.
just don't want anything that's gonna mess with that clarity right now and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
focus.
I find my emotions are very raw once I quit. And that's always a hard thing because I start thinking like, did I make the right choice? Because I'm kind of an asshole today, And I think like,
Yeah,
man, like maybe I'm better, but it's like I see it like there's a hump because the way I see it is like when you're coping in a way, like if you're a workaholic, an alcoholic, pothead, like you're coping in a way that stuffs the stuff you should be dealing with down, right? And then eventually, when you say, "All right, I'm gonna take a vacation," or "I'm gonna like stop this for a while," you have all this unprocessed stuff, layers of it that
yeah,
start coming up. And I know I get like emotional, music starts hitting me hard. I start, like dealing with things that maybe I hadn't dealt with. And it's easy, I think, to be like, uh, wow, I'm a mess. Definitely wrong choice. But I think if you can get through the sleeping is a big thing because when you're tired, you can't handle anything very well. Like
yeah,
that's
it's
the whole
true.
thing too. That's another thing,
It's huge.
like, all these things, if you haven't eaten well, if you haven't, and also your body likes things to go one way. It gets used to vibing the way you're doing it. And when you change it up, your body and your mind is like, I don't, this isn't how I operate. So I think it's like there's a period of time adjustment to any change, big change like that, where it kind of gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah,
But then there's a place where you find your rhythm again without that thing or doing things in a different way, and then you feel like almost like you can't remember what it was like to have it any other way. I did like 2 years sobriety a few years ago, and I was just like, I was very slow to come back to smoking again because it just felt very, very the way I should be. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's everybody has their journey with things, and I think when you're convicted to make a change, even when that change feels a bit like crap, I think it's still good to see it through. That's why I like putting a finite amount of time on it, because then it's like, you can kind of use that a little bit like, I just got to hold on, and then I'll make a decision then. But it also gives it a chance to run its course, to really, 30 days, you get perspective. Maybe at the end of
Right.
that 30 days, it's not going to be such a hard choice. So I think it's important to set goals, for yourself, whether they be restrictive goals or ambitious goals, and put them down on paper, and just keep reading that paper every day and say, okay, can I just make one promise to myself? Can I do this one thing? And
That's
stick to
big.
it
I
just to
think you
see.
mentioned a
You
few
know?
things right there that really got me thinking.
Mm,
Like one was about just like how much we suppress, right? And I I've noticed since I've quit that I don't tolerate certain things like I
mm,
used to,
mm,
and I think it's also um like when it comes to my self-respect as well. Like I think
mm,
I used to tolerate different behaviors in my life, and now that I don't, now that I'm more focused, I don't tolerate certain things or behaviors from my friends and stuff. Like I try not to judge, but at the same time, like I don't want people wasting my time either. Because it's just like
mm,
it took a lot of work for me to get focused to be able to do these things and move myself forward.
mm,
And then if
mm.
you're not respecting
Yeah,
that ambition, then it's like I
yeah,
don't want to waste my time. You know?
yeah. Tolerance is a big thing, in because the thing is, it's like when you're more raw and people are showing something. Sometimes for me, it's like a weakness in other people. Like I see something that I stopped doing and they're still doing it, and I think, man, you're still doing that. But like, there is something to be said about tolerance for others because there's one way of thinking where some people say if you're extremely intolerant of other people, you're intolerant of yourself and you're hard on yourself. When you're hard on other people, you're hard on yourself. And
Right.
I think like, when your emotions are very clear, you're not numbing them down. Like when you're numbing them down, someone acts like a fool, you're kind of like, yeah, whatever. I don't want to fight. I don't want to say anything. That's cool. But like, I think when you're raw with yourself and you're like, I'm feeling everything and I'm feeling my ambitions and I'm feeling my expectations of myself,
Mhm.
you see other people almost like a danger to that. Like
Right.
you're gonna mess up my game because I'm focused. And I think
Right.
it's tricky, because for me, there needs to be like after that, there is a side that's like, how accepting am I being of my own humanity? Like, how hard am I being on myself?
That's huge.
What
Yeah.
about that thing? I quit weed for 3 weeks, or I quit weed for a year, and you're still smoking weed. Man, why don't you get off that? And then the next time I smoke weed, where's that voice? He's inside my head going, man, you idiot, you're messing it up. You're messing it all up. And so so dealing with that tolerance of others
Yeah.
is a good way, I think, of dealing with tolerance for yourself. That's all I wanted to say about that, though, bro. But I hear you.
Well,
I feel the same.
it's you're definitely
Yeah,
right, because it's
yeah,
definitely like these, yeah, emotions are really reflections, like anything you feel towards
yeah,
someone else is really what you're reflecting from yourself,
yeah,
how you feel about
yeah,
yourself, right?
yeah.
So it's like one of my friends, right? Um he's had a problem with alcohol for a while, and he keeps falling back into it, and it's frustrating because I know he's got so much potential, but I also know how much he's been through in his life, and it's
Mm,
like we were talking about before about self-medicating, and that's
yeah,
like it could become a trap, like you just looking for some comfort or a way to escape the pain that you've suffered, and
yeah,
but it's like one of those things. Like I told him, like, hey, I want to help you, but it's like you have to do it yourself. You have to want it yourself.
yeah, yeah. It
It's
is.
like sorry.
Yeah,
It's like being
yeah,
a trainer, a personal trainer. Is like I can't do the
yeah,
push-ups for you. Like
yeah. That's right. That's right. And I think too, like sometimes when people are on a different walk than you, I think, keeping the conversation on common denominators and then letting your life model your values, and I think that will speak more than any advice you could give somebody. Because if somebody looks at you and says, "Man, I hung out with you 2 years ago, and you didn't have much going on, and now you're like, look at you, you got big arms, like you must have been hitting the gym," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I didn't call you every day telling you should hit the gym, but when you see me and you see I'm doing well, there's something about that modeling of a lifestyle is a strong message to a brother. You know what I mean? But also too, turning down the pastime. Like I'm not going to come out drinking
That's a
with you, man.
huge thing.
Even if you're like,
Yeah.
man, I haven't drank in 6 months, but my friend who drinks too much just called me to drink. Maybe that's a good time to be like, well, could we do a coffee? Even if you like having a beer every now and then, don't drink with that guy. You know what I mean? Because you can set a model for that. You can be the guy who always wants to do something other than drink when you hang out with him. And I think that helps too, It's like, and it's feeling responsible for your friends is a funny, tricky thing too,
That's
because
a
you care
huge
for them, you
conversation.
want to
Yeah.
help them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and there's that line of like, I want to help you, but I also don't want to be in a toxic friendship. You know what I mean? Like when you got kids, you got a job, you got ambitions,
Yeah.
you don't want somebody who's like yakking stuff in your head that makes you feel mad and uncomfortable, and you
Exactly.
kind of try to avoid that, so it's a
Yeah.
it's a
Like
thin
I
line.
have yeah, like one of my last jewels is about environment and gravity, right? And it's like
Mm,
depending on this environment or the people you're around, they could bring you
mm,
down. Like gravity. Like everybody in
yeah,
every environment has their own gravity to it. So it's like you gotta
yeah,
be careful who you're around or what elements you're around.
yes, yeah,
So it's not easy.
yes, so
Like
true.
sometimes you just gotta leave people alone, let them figure it out.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
man.
Like I think this is just another example of like what you do. Like you have really great conversations. Um, like men, we need to have conversations and be able to talk about these things. And
Mm,
like I want to bring up your podcast again. Like one thing that we spoke about was fathers, right? And
mm,
that's like that's a really hard conversation to have, and
yeah,
just being able to have that conversation. I don't think I really even seen people have that conversation, about their
yeah,
fathers,
mm,
how complex and how painful that relationship can be, at times, whether
mm,
even I'm blessed to have a great father in my life, and
mm,
but it was still complicated, and it was still a painful relationship, and it's like just growing up and understanding his struggles and then gaining perspective on who he is and his
mm,
upbringing and how that shaped him and how that shaped me, and then just
mm,
what just growing out of giving someone else responsibility over yourself to becoming responsible for your own life and own decisions and where you're at. I
mm,
think that was a great conversation we had, and want to thank you
yeah,
for initiating that conversation, but also like creating those kind of conversations.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the dad stuff, man. I'm reading a book actually. There's a couple books. There's one book called "Becoming the Kind Father." There's another book called "Letters to My Son." I got it here actually. This one here, it's by Kent Nearborn. Both of them talk a lot about the relationship of the father and son. And it's a crazy thing because in some ways, your dad is like, what you aspire to be, or like you see things in him when you're young, you're like, that's what I want to be. And then when you get older, it's either it can become like a benchmark for all you have to be. Well, my dad only did this, so or I'm better than my dad was at keeping my emotions together, so I'm fine. I get that with my kids. I'm like, I don't yell at you like my dad did, so I'm pretty much a perfect dad. Well, that's not true. there's a whole lot more to me, you know, and it's not like I never yell at my kid, but I'm just what I'm trying to illustrate is it's a tricky relationship with your dad because the comparison thinking that goes with your relationship with your father is this roller coaster ride of acceptance and rejection of yourself, you know,
Yo,
and
you
you
said
know
it there.
you yeah, and you're trying to get some validation from a man who most likely most of us, my brother, have fathers who didn't have therapy, didn't have emotional vocabulary, weren't expected to. In fact, were expected to not have it. In fact,
Right.
it was demanded of them to not speak about their feelings and to not have these kind of conversations. So, you know, we're the children of that generation, you know,
Yeah.
and now we're told to be, you know, have these emotions, have these feelings, check in with one another, but it's really hard to check in with your dad, you know,
Yeah.
and like in a real way, you know what I mean? Even if there's a lot of love there, you know, it's really hard to be vulnerable about emotions because for a lot of men in that generation, it's not how you do things. So yeah, it's a very complicated relationship, and I think for me, with my father passing away, that was you know, death of a dream because no matter how bad things got, I always dreamed one day we'd do the big road trip and we'd make amends and everything would be good, you know, and I always had this dream of this relationship that might happen. Maybe we'll get old enough, you know, so close in age by the time, you know, we're older, we'd have that time. And we never had that time, you know? And and so now who's left to deal with my dad's stuff? Me, right? Just me. There's no, he'll never tell me the things I wanted him to say to me that I thought he would say to me if he just understood me, you know? So, so that walk, that's when I realized that walk, that validation of my, through my relationship with my father was really a conversation I needed to be having with myself, you know? In the end, he's a man and he's my father, but he's just a man. The internal struggle, no matter what he did or didn't do, it doesn't fix. There's nothing he could have done that could make me not have to do all this soul searching about what it means to be a man, the kind of
Right.
man I envision myself to be, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, he had his time on this world and he gave me what he could, you know, for good, for better, for worse. And I try to like, you know, my song about him, I say I take the best parts of you and I put them forward. You know, I try to live life and offer more words of encouragement, nourishment to my kids, you know. And you know, that was just saying like, because when they're gone, it's the best parts you remember. You know what I mean? You hang on to, right? And so, so yeah, so that's been my whole dad side. I wish he was around more while I had kids because he died when my kids were really small. So my third child wasn't even born, and you know, I wish I could be talking to him about all this shit I'm going through right now. You know, like, and not, it's not like all bad or anything, but there's a lot of things I'd like to be like, hey, how was this for you? What did you know? What happened? I still talk to him. I do. You know, I talk to him all the time. Every time I see a red-tailed hawk, I say that's my dad.
That's dope.
Every
Yeah.
time I see a red-tailed hawk fly by, I say, hey, dad. And you know, I think he'd be proud of me. I try to tell myself that, but at the same time, like I know so much of the negative talk in my head is from him. I know so much of the thoughts that are running around my head, and like when I mess up and you know I say bad things to myself, that's from him. You know, and so it's a very it's a funny relationship. You know, it's a
Yeah.
funny mind state. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, man. And like I think like um yeah, just having these conversations, they're not easy, or just to be able to have these conversations and learning to develop the ability to have these kind of conversations, it takes a lot of courage, you know. And like we were talking about um the courage of vulnerability before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I want to ask you because like one of the biggest things I do on this show is like uh, and in the jewels is definitions, right? So I wanted to ask you, what is your definition of vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, I think honesty, true honesty. Um, uh, Honesty about the bad things and honesty about your faults, I think that's a doorway to vulnerability. Um, but also vulnerability can be in your um willingness to be there for someone, to like for your kids or for your mom or whatever, like your willingness to fall short in other areas for the sake of somebody else, you know what I mean? Like your
Yeah,
job
what do you mean
suffers
by that?
because,
What do you mean by that?
well, let's say if you put your kids first, if you really put your kids first, and your boss says, you're going to lose your job if you don't come here. Now there's, like there's a thing there. It's like, well, putting my kids first means putting food on the table. But if my child really, really needs me, do I need a job that doesn't understand that? Do I need to work somewhere that doesn't understand putting kids first, what that means? So that vulnerability there is saying, like, against all odds, I put you first. I put this relationship first, and
Yeah,
I trust God or trust the process or trust that love, that if my life's not making sense for me to be there for you in that way, then maybe I need to check what my life's all about. Maybe I need to maybe I need to reframe how I put food on the table, because if it's making you not be able to be vulnerable and open and there for somebody, maybe, that you want to be, like, maybe there's a part of that needs reevaluating. So just to get back to vulnerability, like, when you care for someone that much and put them first, you're now vulnerable to the workforce, right? They could just axe you because you didn't do what they told you to do. So that's vulnerability there. You become vulnerable. Is it a plus or a minus? I don't know. It depends on your ambitions. It depends on your goals. It depends on where you're at with your life. But still, I would say, yeah, vulnerability is opening yourself up to a weakness, to something that could get the better of you. But you do it anyways because you want to be, or you've chosen to be vulnerable in that way. Yeah, that's how I'd say it.
okay. So it that made me think of a few things. So um one is we spoke about our generation, right? We spoke about our fathers and their generation, now how they handle things, and now we
Mm.
have a different expectation. um and is I guess vulnerability is one of the expectations for our generation, right?
Mm. Mm.
and and still to maintain that level of manhood while still being able to be vulnerable is it's not an easy task, like trying to balance these things, and it's
Yeah.
and that's one thing I think women don't understand in a relationship, trying to balance these that dichotomy, I guess, like these opposing
Hmm.
forces of like how how we're perceived, how we're expected to act, and how they say they want us to act, and how
Mm. Yeah.
society's what they say they want,
Yeah.
and it's not. I don't even know how possible it is to do it all the time,
No.
you know.
Yeah, and I don't think so. I mean, stoicism is very important to the way we're wired to be stoic, and that means withholding your griping and your emotions so you can get on with things. I mean, that's stoicism is the only reason that we've survived as a species. The man's stoicism, our ability to put everything aside, our emotions aside, and do what must be done. And that's, and I think in conflict with a spouse, with your wife, or with your girl, or whatever, I think it's really important to, like, I think it's important that there is like an understanding that there could be a very different way of managing the stress of an argument. Like, I find I need, like, I need to walk. Like there's a point in an argument where I have to leave and walk because I'm not getting anywhere. My anger is rising. My thoughts are spinning. You're seeing everything in black and white. You're about to start saying things you don't really mean because everything's black and white. I mean, that's fight or flight. You know, there is like biological chemistry going on that is hardwired into you, for conflict and a way you
Right.
manage with conflict, right? Um, and to just say like, oh, just calm down to be a sensitive guy. I mean, it's not fair. It's not fair to expect, you know, 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, however, whatever you know about history or believe about history, you know, to just, don't deal with it. Deal with it the way your wife's dealing with it. That's not, it can't be. And I think there needs to be a lot of dialogue around, you know, the the expenditure of energy when the anger arises, and your ability to deal with that energy as it's coming up, um and I think, yeah, men just do things in a different way. I mean, I it's really tricky now because there's a lot of backlash about being putting too fine a point on a man or a woman, and don't say what a man should do or wouldn't do because that's sexist. But I mean, I think I could put it in the context of me as a man and the men that I've had conversations with. We talk about, but there is also research. There's books on it. And men. We just there needs to be physical expression of energy. You feel pent up, you feel trapped, you feel stuck, you feel like you can't get your words out, you can't, you need that walk, you need that space, to come back down. And that's still being sensitive, that's being sensitive to yourself, it's being sensitive to your partner. I don't want you to see me like this. I can't control myself right now, I love you, but what you're saying is making me go a little squirrely, and I can't, you know. So, and just to that, Darnell, I'm also reading another book on anger management, and anger, it's not in the moment. It starts with that thinking in the morning when you're like, man, I can't believe like I have to do this again.
Yeah.
And then it's, an hour later you're thinking in your head, I wish she would have said that to me, or wish she didn't say that to me. And it goes as the day goes on. It's this little fuse. It's like in the cartoons where they light the fuse around the corner, and you see it like
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
along the trail, and then it's
Yeah.
following along, going up and over something, and it's a fuse. It's slowly burning as the day goes on. And this is where anger management comes in, because at some point, if you can stop that angry thinking, it doesn't feel like anything wrong. You're not getting mad. You're not yelling. You're not freaking out, but you're getting these little pinpricks of endorphins that are getting you mad. And then when you hit that moment where you're really tested, there's this backlog of anger, and it doesn't even have to be at that person, right? It's like you're angry about a lot of things, and then there's someone in your life. Unfortunately, often it's our spouses or our kids that for some reason they're the ones we give ourselves license to be angry with. We didn't get angry at our boss. We didn't get angry at our coworker. We didn't even get angry at that crazy guy on the subway. The people who kind of maybe deserved our anger, you know, but we give ourselves license to get angry at somebody else. And, in our life that's close to us, that we love, that we're safe with.
Yeah.
So, as far as that, like, and then it is a physical, not that, women have a physical response to anger as well, but I often find like guys will slam a door but a woman might start to cry, so there's like there's still a physical response there, but there's
Yeah.
like
Just how we release it.
like a breaking of there's a breaking point of that emotion where it's too much. And because a lot of men aren't, won't, we go to anger as our go-to strong emotion. We might actually be sad as hell, but we're gonna
That's
get
what I
mad,
mean.
yeah. So
Like
yeah.
me, I can't.
Anyways.
Like, I don't know. Crying just didn't make sense to me. Like when I was a little kid, I used to cry a lot, but after became like a teenager, I didn't cry
Mhm.
from then. Um,
Yeah.
on pretty much, you know. So and then it just felt like I never had that release, you know,
Mm,
like this anger, this
yeah.
pent up or sadness, you know. It was just like I think I
Hmm.
might have cried like 2 times in my life since I was
Mm,
like 12, right? And it was just like, and I didn't, it still doesn't feel good to me. Like my girl, when she cries, she said she feels better after she cries. I don't feel better
mm,
after I cry. I don't feel like I feel like tired. I feel like my body's just like feels worse after that, you know. And so
yeah.
I just don't even like crying. I do believe that it's good, or I do believe it's a good thing, but it just feels
Mm,
unnatural to me, you know. So I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, could I ask, were you alone or were you around somebody else?
When I cried,
Yeah.
yeah, the last time I cried, yeah, I was around somebody. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But I mean, like it was, um, yeah, it was like one of the worst days of my life, yo. So it was just like a
Mm,
terrible, terrible time, you know. But it was just, I don't know. I just felt weak and tired, like you were talking about
hmm.
nervous system. Like I felt
Yeah.
taxed the rest of the
Yeah.
day, and the next day I felt taxed afterwards.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think, so I'm someone who I would say I cry often, like compared to maybe most people like or like guys. Uh, and I think it's like when you tell me you think you cried like maybe twice, I would say, yeah, you must have. Like, I feel pretty spent when I cry, especially when when it's like something super strong, like missing my father, like when my father died, or like, major stuff happens, like really traumatic things, or just remembering traumatic things. Um, but I would also say that I think um, if you haven't cried much in your life, there's a lot coming out when you're crying. You know what I mean? It's not that one thing that triggered it, right? It's like you're saying, a release that maybe you haven't had, you know what I mean? For like where you maybe there were other times in your life that warranted it and it never came,
Yeah.
and so, when you finally, it's just like that. It's kind of like it's just a
Oh,
strong emotion. Just, oh, yeah,
sorry to cut you off, but it's gonna cut off, and then I'm start a new.
call me back. Okay, yeah,
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 I'll
yeah.
make you
You want to
back,
just
and then
start a new
we'll
one?
start up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do a new one. Yeah, let's start a new one.
yeah. Sorry to cut you off right
That's okay. It's all good. I remember.
there. Boom. Straight.
Hey, yeah,
Yeah.
so I was saying, so in the same way that like anger, if it's been building up for weeks and then you get a release, sometimes that anger can be so strong after that buildup that you look back on that situation, you're like, what just happened? I felt like a moment of insanity. I feel beside myself. I feel outside of myself. I feel like I don't even know what to think of myself.
Yeah.
A heavy cry after years of not crying, you're gonna feel pretty rough, because so much is coming out of you. It's like it's an emotional vomiting. You know what I mean? It's like all
Yeah.
this stuff that's been just
Absolutely.
like turning inside you is finally just it just comes out. If you're someone who cries often or cries more often than that, it can feel refreshing because it's that little bit that's been hanging around and you just kind of get it out. And I'll tell you, like, I feel refreshed after crying, but I had a therapist who encouraged me to conjure crying, to create a situation where I would feel safe and emotionally uh sort of like conjured to cry, sad music, in the shower, think about things, a picture of my daughter. I was telling you, I have a daughter who passed away when she was a baby, and you know, things to conjure the cry. And the reason why she encouraged me to is because when my daughter passed away, I would try it after a month. I went back to work, and I was working on a
Jeez.
construction site, and I just start to cry, and I'd have
Yeah.
to go hide somewhere, right? And I went there and I was like, what do I do? Like, I'm trying to work. I gotta work. I can't be blubbering in the middle of like carrying a like 2,000 pound bathtub, like, you know. And she said, you need to go and make yourself cry. I'm like, make myself cry? She was like, yeah, go there. Focus on that hurt. Focus on that thing you've been avoiding. Like, so it doesn't sneak up on you and kick your ass, you know? And so that's how it started. And then it turned into something where sometimes I'm just like, maybe not cry, but at least need to focus on this sadness, you know? I need to really accept it and put it in there in its place, in its context, you know, and give it to God. I, I can't do this. I, I, I don't know how to handle this feeling, but it won't leave me alone, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's it. It's hitting it head on. And that's the stoicism we're talking about. Like that's how you're sensitive with yourself, I believe. Like you don't sidestep your issues, you don't sidestep your feelings, you don't squish them down. You hit them head on, you know? You just say, all right, how mad am I? Bam, bam, punch that bag. You know what I mean? How sad am I? Like picture that face or picture the
That's
person or picture the
that's
hurt,
the
you know?
that's
Yeah.
the irony of this whole thing about manhood as well is, we do all these things to escape emotions, but
Mm,
the real courageous thing is to confront them, and that's the only
yeah.
way to be able to be a whole person, and
Yeah. Yeah.
to be healthy, mentally healthy. Like you really have to be able to confront all the
Yeah.
sides of yourself, and
Yeah.
and even in relationships too. Like you have to, you and your partner, you have to be able to confront the the, the sides of the relationships that's not the most pleasant or not easy to talk about. You have to confront those things, have the conversations, and really, um, I guess, confront the boogeyman, in the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. And and everybody's got their own comfort zone. Like,
Right,
sometimes your wife is not the person you need to get your anger out to. You know what I mean?
right,
Like
right.
sometimes you need somebody, some friend who's like, I'm you can be as angry as you want, man. I'm cool. You know what I mean? And let them be someone you get angry with, you know. I think it's important that, that you choose wisely the sides of you show. I mean, vulnerability is great, but it's important to be conscientious of your effects on other people, you know. I was
Big
watching
time.
Bill Burr. Yeah, I was watching Bill Burr talk about his dog. He's talking about how he didn't realize every time he got angry by himself, his dog was right there, and his dog he was starting to get vicious, and he didn't realize. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he didn't realize that it was his own little private moments of getting angry at the TV where the dog was like, "Ugh," like freaking out, you know, and
yeah,
we have that effect on other people, you know, like we
yeah,
think we're just talking about our boss, we think we're just talking about our day, but we're telling our wife about it, and
yeah,
she's like taking in all this animosity, all this anger, all this stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
that's not the person to lay it in on, you know? Like maybe
yeah,
there's someone who wouldn't take it so hard, you know, who could
yeah,
handle it better, you know? Maybe you do have a wife who you get, you're very comfortable being angry about other things with. It's just all I'm saying is it's important to check, like, especially with kids. Like your kids don't
yeah,
need to hear all the details, you know? So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, even not even the details. We don't even as kids. I didn't know any details, but I knew
Yeah.
anger
Yeah.
though. Like I
Yeah.
know when
Sure.
it sounded like when I'm a little kid, it sounds scary when something's going on. I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
That's true. That's true. Well, yeah, and that's definitely something I want to say about all this stuff is, you know, adult children. What is the adult child? The adult child is that frozen person that has remained inside you since you were a child, and the trauma you had as a child, the things you didn't understand, the things you were afraid of, that still is inside you, in like a lot of people are walking around with PTSD and they don't even know it.
for
Okay,
sure.
because it happened to so many of us because spanking was normal. Like screaming was normal. Like parents were told, like spare the rod, spoil the child. Like, there was a time in that generation, for our generation, it's just like, and it still goes on, but I'm just saying, like, there's trauma that happens to children all the time, and PTSD signs of that are nervousness, shakiness, any authority around you, you feel weak and funny. Anyone starts yelling and getting angry around you, you feel funny and weak
Right,
and not sure
right,
if you can handle the situation. If you're feeling that when you're around people, it's PTSD, and I think it's like it's important, look up PTSD and what are the symptoms. And that's important, researching these things for yourself. Like I don't think everyone should just run out and diagnose themselves, but I think
right,
trying to frame your life and your psychological makeup around the research, I think it's really important to start. And you don't, that's one thing I wanted to say to you too, is like, what if you can't get therapy right now? It's hard to get therapy
exactly.
right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Okay. What if you can't? But you can think about yourself and what you do and ask Google, what is that? What are people who do this? Now it's a rabbit hole going down Google. I know that. But
yeah,
you can start putting together the pieces a little bit, and you know, there's strategies for dealing with stuff like that, dealing with OCD, dealing with PTSD, dealing with depressive, bipolar, whatever. Even if it's all a spectrum, right? So even if you got it a little bit, gleaning some information on how people with PTSD deal with it, applying a little bit of that strategy to your life, those can be the first steps to feeling better. If you're just waiting around for someone to diagnose you and give you a pill, I mean,
yeah,
it could be
yeah,
a long wait for mental health, but you
yeah.
can glean a little bit of like, hey, I'm dealing with that. Well, how would they do that? Oh, okay. All right. Well, maybe, oh, sleep. Yeah, I could sleep more, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
so
what I
that's what
think
I,
it
yeah.
is, like
Mm,
this is one thing that I'm sure I might get backlash for my opinion on it. But like when it comes to mental health, I think most of the problems out there can be dealt with um just just healthier practices, like more holistic approach to life. And
yeah.
there definitely are situations where people need medication and there's mental illnesses and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I think like just like I think most of the people that are suffering from a headache just need more water. I
Hmm.
think I
Yeah.
think most of the people that are suffering from depression or anxiety, there's ways to treat that just by learning yourself, learning how you deal with situations and perspective, how we look at
Yeah.
situations, how we look at life. And that's
Yeah.
that's why I started the jewels. That's why I started
Yeah.
studying, learning
Hmm.
these things, learning about psychology, learning about um, just even um, different, like just how to think, learning how to think better, learning philosophy about stoicism, just all these different things that the way the mind plays tricks on us,
Yeah.
neuroscience, just even learning how the brain works,
Yeah.
and like you spoke about fight or flight, and how many of our problems come from fight or flight and just conflict
Hmm.
in any kind of situation. And once you realize
Yeah.
how your brain operates, you have a lot
Yeah.
more power over the situations, and you
I have
know,
a similar view to you as well. Like I see medication as, as crisis intervention, you're having a heart attack, you need a defibrillator, but that doesn't mean you should be jolting that every day to keep your heart healthy. There are
yeah, yeah,
steps to take,
exactly,
right? And like I think some people are at a point with mental health where they can't start any good new habits because it's so debilitating what they have going on that they can't, and if the anxiety's high or the rage is high or whatever it is. It's like, how am I supposed to start having new habits like going out for a jog when I'm agoraphobic? I can't get out of the house. Like, so there's I think when you're at crisis state, I do see how medication can help bring you to a place where you can start making positive change. But I do feel like, you know, I feel like the whole healthcare, mental health, physical health, there's all this disease management, whereas there should be health and
right,
prevention, right? There
right,
should be a way of life that, like, that allows us to actually live healthy. Like once you're managing the disease, it's well past being healthy. It's saving the body and the mind from crisis at that point, right? So, so I'm totally with you. I think it can be avoided. I think it can be dealt with. New habits should arise with your medication, of okay, now that I'm not scared to leave my house, or now that I'm not feeling these feelings as strongly, what else can I do? What are the habits that help me with that? And I think that's really important, is to see that it's one piece of a whole part of getting better and getting well. It's like it's meant to be, the crutches while you're learning to walk, but you still want to rehabilitate that foot. You still want it. You don't want to be on them, all the
Yeah,
time, so
yeah.
yeah.
I don't
Mhm.
think a pill should be the answer for everything, like
Mhm.
just like to use that analogy again with the headaches, and people are taking Tylenol more than they're drinking water to fix the headache, and
Yeah, yeah,
that's just our culture, like our society in a nutshell, like how many people are dehydrated, you know,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
we're just turning to this medication or these pills, these drugs, basically just to to solve a problem that's not even, we got the natural resource to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I think, this would be a whole other podcast, but I think,
Yeah,
questioning the motives of why all these options are so, heavily and like prescribed to deal with the stuff, like, why is so much food have carcinogens in it? You know, why are we, like you say, dealing with headaches, and with pills, and there's no like you don't ever see like drink water commercials. Why? Because
yeah,
water's free, right? You could
yeah,
pour it out of the tap around here, anyways. Um, so it's I think it's important to recognize that like taking cues from like trends is not necessarily pointing you towards health. Health is can be there's like you say there's so many natural ways to dealing with a lot of this stuff, and it's amazing how some simple fixes can really change how you feel overall. There's a really good book called Food and Mood, and I can't remember who writes it, but it's incredible, like just how much your mood is affected by the things you're ingesting. So
yeah.
it could just be vitamin deficiency making you respond in certain ways. So yeah, it's a pretty fantastic organism we're running here, with all kinds of needs, and it all impacts everything going on inside the brain. So
Right,
yeah,
right. And that's
yeah.
what I mean. I think at the end of the day, we gotta realize our way of life is very unhealthy,
Mm,
and it's
mm,
very unnatural. Like everything that we're doing, it just compounds, and it's been compounded for generations, and then we're quickly developing all these different ways of life and trying to keep up with these things and with technology, but we're so out of touch and out of sync with nature itself and our bodies.
mm,
So that's why, um, yeah, just like we were talking about, just understanding the body, understanding yourself, understanding how the brain works, plays such a
mm.
vital role in mental health. Like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
learning neuroscience was huge for me. I was
Mm,
listening to this neuroscience podcast, and it would explain so many things that would go on with the brain and how we would react and how we would perceive things, and it was just um yeah, it would explain why I would get into situations and get anxious, or why yeah, like you talk about, just food, how that affects the brain or how we perceive things, and
mm.
affects our nervous system. And yeah, just learning about the nervous system, I think that could go such a long way for people um to have better mental health and be more in control of their life.
Yeah, Yeah, that's those are true words, man. Yeah, investing in your own experience, and really being a Sherlock Holmes about your own thing, really being like, what, like asking yourself questions and taking comfort in that, first of all, you're the expert on you, number one. You, like, even if you've been stuffing your feelings down, if you poke around a bit, you start figuring yourself out. Even your body, you know your body better than your doctor knows your body. And I think, like, being a bit of a sleuth about yourself, making that part of figuring you out, because in the end, it's going to take you, if you have success in figuring yourself out, it's going to take you to your heart's desire, because really, you, somewhere inside you, are the answers for you, what you want to be doing with your time, what you want to be doing with your life. But it's all mixed up in all this lock and key combinations and funny ways where we're experiencing
Right.
life, that's sort of convoluting our choices, our sense of what our choices should be, right? There's sense of duty, there's sense of responsibility, there's sense of, like, I would love to do that, but who's gonna make money doing that? There's all this weird stuff going on. I never have the energy for it. I'm too old. Whatever the things are that stop you from doing the things maybe you'd want to do. But like we're saying, it's like, it's multifaceted. There's mental
Right.
health, there's physical health, there's all that stuff. And I just think, yeah, like, continuing that quest to know thyself, as they say, I really do feel like that knowledge is key to healthiness. Man. Yeah, man.
Sure. Yeah, that's the goal. And like one of the biggest lessons I learned is like all these things that we um like that we consider problems are really just signals of the problem. Like there's um they're like the leaves to the tree, So like you got they keep trying to deal with the symptoms instead of the problem itself, right?
Mm,
And
yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things, like our emotions, whether we're talking about our emotions, that's a signal of what's going on inside, right? And same with
Mm,
illnesses, any kind of illnesses, I think is
yeah.
like um it's definitely something I learned from those neuroscience podcasts and books and stuff too, is like they're all just signals of what's going on, what's really going on, and we gotta dig deeper and look within
Yeah.
ourselves to figure that out.
Yes, man. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
brother. Like
yeah.
another enlightening conversation with my dude Lefspek, yo. Know what I
Yeah, we had the
mean?
good one. Yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
man.
one for the books for
Yeah.
sure, yo. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah.
thanks for having me. I've been
Thank
yeah.
you for making the time to have this conversation and sharing your wisdom and sharing your
Mhm,
story and
mhm.
sharing also the some really good book references too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, let me do this one last one. I really recommend this one. The Anger Workbook by Les Carter and Frank Minirth. You can get this one. This is really good. It takes you through actual, like, steps where you kind of like fill in the blanks. They are Christians. They reference a Bible here or there, but it's not necessarily indoctrinated. It's just it uses it as references.
Okay.
Uh, but it's a really, any book like that that gets you asking questions about anger, because that's what I would always just say, that the research, it's not like our dads. There's research now. There's people who've
Right.
written whole books on what we're deardealing with. There's, like you say, we can learn about neuroscience. And so, yeah, I would definitely say, like, check out those books, or any books that are on the subject. Books are so good for your mind and soul. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Is there
Yeah, man.
anything you want to plug? Anything coming down the pike soon?
Well, I'll say definitely the emotional revolution of modern man is gonna come back. I think I'm gonna
Yeah,
do some more of that. I've been inspired by you and Sharuk, and just that time. And yeah, man, Lefspek is my MC name. I rap about some of the stuff we talk about. I've kind of been in that mind state even as a rapper for a little while. And yeah, so you can find me on Bandcamp. It's Lefspek. You can find me on YouTube, the same deal. But yeah, man, and yeah, I hope we make a track soon, bro.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, we
Another
should
one.
do another
Yeah,
one.
man.
Yeah, be awesome. That's
Perfect,
right.
yo.
Do another
Yeah,
track. Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
listened
yo,
to
I've
the
listened.
10 City, yo. I was listening to that not too long ago.
I know we were waiting on Zeppo and then it fell off. I never finished it. That's right. But I listened to your album, Worst Enemy, just in the last 2 days, and I was really feeling it, man. I was like, your rhyme schemes are what the heck. I was just like, and and I like it, and it's funny because I just heard another album by this guy Ill Informed, who he did a half of his tracks like didn't have drums. And I saw Circuit Breaker did a little bit of that type of production, or maybe you guys chose that afterwards. But there was I'm always feeling that. It's just it brings the MC in right front and center with just like
Right,
the
right.
nice sample, but like no drums and just that ill flow going. I was like, man, and I have to say, like the Chill Squad vibe, it's just like I don't know, like when you and Zeppo were on the track together, I was just like, oh man, you guys are like unique in just your imagery and the cadence, and it's like I don't know, you guys are like twin brothers, not twins, but there's just
Yeah,
something Chill Squad about it. I can't even, I don't know. I remember when I first heard you guys on, I can't remember. It must have been Facebook that I linked up and then heard your YouTube or Bandcamp. But yes, it was a blessing, man. I really appreciate that album. It was great,
thank you,
man.
man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I hear
that.
your heart in there. Yeah, if you haven't heard Worst Enemy, my worst enemy, my own worst enemy, you gotta check it out. My Prophet, man. It's an ill album, like street ill, man. It's so good. Yeah, check it
Thanks,
out,
brother.
man. Yes.
Thank you, man.
Yes.
Thank you.
All
Yeah,
right.
we'll link up. We'll definitely link up soon, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You should come by and hang out. We'll do some beats or something, man. Hang out in my basement. Chill out.
All right, dope, dope.
All
Sounds
right.
good,
All
man.
right. Okay, man.
Yeah,
I'll
once
talk to you
again,
soon.
thank you. Thank you. Salute to you,
Yes.
brother.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having me. Thanks for having me on the show. Prophet Jules, man.
yeah, yeah, there
Peace,
we
man.
go.
Yeah, yeah,
Peace,
yeah.
peace.
See you. Yeah, peace, bro. Bye.
From steel bed borders to live from headquarters.